The scent of pine and cinnamon hung thick in the air of Sterling Tower's executive floor, mingling with the sharp bite of espresso and the faint hum of a building that never truly slept. Snow pressed against the floor-to-ceiling windows, turning Manhattan into a watercolor of white and gold, blurred by the heat inside. Nathaniel Sterling stood at the glass, one hand pressed to the cold surface, watching the city below prepare for Christmas, a holiday he'd long since learned to endure rather than celebrate. The streets glittered with lights strung between lampposts, carolers gathered in clusters far below, their voices swallowed by distance and the thick panes of bulletproof glass that separated him from everything real. But before we step deeper into this memory, tell me in the comments where in the world you're listening from. Like this video so this story reaches more hearts, and subscribe to follow the next journeys. He was 42, sharp-edged and controlled, a man built from discipline and distance. His father had taught him that vulnerability was a luxury reserved for those who could afford to lose. Nathaniel had never been one of them. Sterling Enterprises had been his inheritance, his prison, and his pride. A tech empire worth billions, built on algorithms that predicted human behavior with unnerving accuracy. Ironic, he thought, that he'd spent 2 decades understanding everyone but himself. The company had started as his father's vision, and Nathaniel had simply stepped into the mold prepared for him, becoming exactly what was expected. The office was immaculate, charcoal walls that absorbed light rather than reflected it, Danish furniture with clean lines and no sentiment. A single painting hung on the far wall, abstract, expensive, utterly meaningless. Someone at a gallery had told him it was important, so he'd bought it. On his desk sat a crystal tumbler of whiskey he hadn't touched, the amber liquid catching the light, and a leather planner filled with meetings that bled into one another like ink in water. December 23rd. 2 days until Christmas. He'd spend it alone, as always, in the penthouse overlooking Central Park, surrounded by silence and the faint echo of a life he'd never quite learned how to live. The door opened without a knock. He didn't turn. He knew her footsteps, the soft, careful rhythm of someone who'd learned not to intrude. Mr. Sterling, the quarterly reports are ready for review. Her voice was quiet, careful, the kind of voice that never asked for more space than it was given. It carried a warmth that didn't belong in his sterile office. Lily Dawson, 28 years old. Pale skin dusted with freckles across her nose. Dark hair usually pulled back in a bun that never quite stayed neat by day's end. She wore the same navy cardigan she'd worn for 3 winters now, the cuffs frayed at the edges. She carried a leather portfolio that looked older than she was, its corners worn smooth. She'd been his assistant for 4 years, efficient, invisible, essential. He knew her schedule better than he knew his own heartbeat. Coffee at 6:45, always with too much cream. Lunch at her desk, usually leftovers in a glass container. She left at 7, never earlier, never later, and took the F train home to Brooklyn. He knew these things the way he knew stock trends and profit margins. What he didn't know, what unnerved him, was why, lately, the sound of her footsteps in the hallway made something in his chest tighten, why he found himself listening for her voice. "Leave them," he said, not turning from the window. His reflection ghosted in the glass, overlaying the city. She hesitated. He felt it. The pause. The breath she held before speaking again. "Are you feeling all right, Mr. Sterling?" He closed his eyes. The question was so gentle it almost hurt. "I'm fine." "You've been standing there for 20 minutes. Have you been watching me, Miss Dawson?" The question came out sharper than he'd intended. The silence stretched. When he finally turned, she was looking at him with those eyes, gray-green, storm-colored, too knowing for someone who never said more than necessary. There was no judgment in her gaze, only concern. "I pay attention," she said simply, holding his gaze. "It's my job. Something in her tone unsettled him. Not defiance, not pity. Something worse, concern, or the kind of quiet observation that saw through the armor he'd spent a lifetime polishing. She saw him, and it terrified him. He wanted to tell her to leave. Instead, he found himself saying, "Do you have plans for Christmas?" Her expression shifted, just a flicker, gone before he could name it. "I'll be with my grandmother in Brooklyn." "That sounds nice." The words felt inadequate, clumsy. "It is." The conversation died there, leaving him with the uncomfortable sense that she'd seen something he hadn't meant to show. She set the reports on his desk with precise care, aligned them perfectly with the edge, and turned to go. "Miss Dawson." She stopped, hand on the doorframe. "Thank you." She didn't ask what for. She just nodded, once, and left him alone with the snow and the silence and the strange, unshakable feeling that he'd just missed something important. Outside, the city glittered with promise. Inside, Nathaniel Sterling stood in his immaculate office and wondered, for the first time in years, what it might feel like to be seen, to be known, to be something other than the sum of his achievements and the weight of his father's expectations. The next morning arrived cold and unforgiving, the kind of December day that turned breath to vapor and made the city feel smaller, more intimate, like everyone was huddled together against the wind. Nathaniel arrived at 7 sharp, as always, his driver dropping him at the private entrance where no photographers waited. The lobby was quiet, security nodding as he passed, and the elevator carried him up in smooth, silent ascent to the 40th floor, where his empire was managed and his life was lived in careful isolation. He found his office already prepared, coffee brewing in the French press by the window, the rich aroma filling the space, reports organized in neat stacks on his desk, color-coded tabs marking urgent items. The thermostat was adjusted to exactly 70 degrees because Lily had noticed months ago that he worked better in warmth, that the cold made him tense his shoulders. She'd never asked. She'd just quietly made the adjustment, and he'd pretended not to notice her noticing him. She was at her desk when he passed, fingers flying over the keyboard with practiced efficiency, a half-eaten bagel beside her wrapped in wax paper, cream cheese visible at the edges. She didn't look up. She never did in these early moments, respecting his preference for silence before the day's demands began. But he found himself slowing, just slightly, as if proximity alone might offer some answer to the question he hadn't yet learned to ask. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling." Her voice came without breaking her typing rhythm. "Morning." He continued to his office, closed the door, and sat at his desk with the uncomfortable awareness that the space felt emptier than it should. The coffee was perfect. The reports were prioritized exactly as he'd need them. Everything was in order. So why did he feel like something was missing? The day unfolded in the usual rhythm. Conference calls with Tokyo, contract negotiations with the startup in Berlin, a meeting with the board that left him colder than the weather outside. His CFO presented projections that pleased everyone. His head of development outlined an acquisition strategy. Nathaniel listened, approved, moved forward with mechanical precision. But underneath, something gnawed at him, a restlessness he couldn't name. By 3 o'clock, his head ached, and his patience had worn thin. He pressed his fingers to his temples, eyes closed, trying to massage away the tension. He didn't hear her enter until she spoke. "I brought you aspirin." He looked up, startled. She stood in the doorway, backlit by the afternoon sun, holding a glass of water in one hand and 2 white pills in her palm. Her cardigan was slightly askew, pushed up at the sleeves. "How did you get headaches when you skip lunch." She crossed the room with quiet confidence, set the glass on his desk. "You skipped lunch." He took the aspirin, swallowed it dry despite the water sitting right there, and watched her turn to leave. The efficiency of her care unsettled him. She anticipated his needs before he recognized them himself. Stay. The word came out rougher than he'd intended, almost a command but with an edge of plea underneath. She froze, looked back at him with surprise widening her eyes. Sir? Sit. He gestured to the chair across from him. Just sit. For a moment. She hesitated, weighing propriety against the request. Finally, she lowered herself into the chair with careful grace, someone who'd learned not to take up too much space. Her hands folded in her lap. She waited. Nathaniel didn't know what he'd meant to say. The silence stretched awkward and strange between them. Outside, the city hummed. Inside, the clock ticked steadily. Do you like working here? He finally asked. Yes. Why? She blinked, genuinely confused. I beg your pardon. Why do you stay? He leaned back, studying her. You're overqualified for this position. You have a degree in literature from Columbia. I've seen your transcripts. They're in your personnel file. You graduated summa cum laude. You could be teaching, writing, doing something more. Her jaw tightened, just barely, but he saw it. A flash of something that might have been anger or hurt. I stay because I'm good at what I do. Her voice was steady, but there was steel underneath. And because not everyone measures success the same way you do, Mr. Sterling. The rebuke landed soft, but sure. He felt it settle in his chest, a small bright hurt that was somehow cleansing. I didn't mean to offend you. You didn't. She stood, smoothed her skirt with hands that trembled slightly. You just assumed. You assumed that because I'm your assistant, I must want to be something else. Something more. But maybe... She stopped, met his eyes with directness that stole his breath. Maybe I already have everything I need. She left before he could respond, the door clicking shut with finality. Nathaniel sat alone in his office, the taste of aspirin bitter on his tongue, and realized with sudden clarity that he'd been cruel without meaning to be. Worse, he'd revealed himself. The question hadn't been about her at all. It had been about him. About his own emptiness, his own dissatisfaction with a life that looked perfect but felt hollow. He'd projected his restlessness onto her, and she'd seen right through him. That night, as he prepared to leave, later than usual, the building mostly empty, he found a small package on his desk, brown paper, tied with kitchen twine. No card. He unwrapped it carefully. Inside, a worn paperback copy of The Great Gatsby, pages soft with use, margins filled with penciled notes in her handwriting. And tucked inside, a note on cream paper. You asked why I stay. Maybe this will help you understand. Some of us find meaning in the small things, in doing good work, in being present, in choosing purpose over prestige. LD. He opened the book to a dog-eared page, found the underlined passage, her note beside it reading, This is what matters. He smiled understandingly, much more than understandingly. It was one of those rare smiles with a quality of eternal reassurance in it that you may come across 4 or 5 times in life. Nathaniel closed the book, pressed it to his chest, and felt something crack open inside him. Something he'd kept locked for so long he'd forgotten it was there. Permission, maybe. Permission to want something other than what he'd been taught to value. When he looked up, she was gone. But the office smelled faintly of her perfume, something soft, like vanilla and rain. And for the first time in years, he didn't want to go home. Christmas Eve arrived with fresh snow and a city that had finally exhaled into holiday quiet. The usual frenetic energy of Manhattan had softened, replaced by something gentler. Families walking slowly, bundled against the cold. Children pressed against shop windows to see displays of trains and toys. Sterling Tower was nearly empty. Skeleton staff, dimmed lights, the hush of a building holding its breath. Most employees had left by noon, rushing to catch trains and flights to wherever home meant to them. Nathaniel had insisted on working through the holiday, citing year-end reports and strategic planning. But the truth sat heavier in his chest. He had nowhere else to be. The penthouse was waiting. 3,200 square feet of designer furniture and temperature-controlled wine storage and floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the park like a painting he owned, but never really saw. His housekeeper had left a prepared meal in the refrigerator, neatly labeled containers. Everything was arranged. Everything was empty. At noon, Lily appeared in his doorway with her coat already on, the same wool coat she'd worn for years, dark blue with toggles instead of buttons, slightly too big. A red scarf was wound around her neck, hand-knitted with slightly uneven stitches. "I'm heading out, Mr. Sterling. My grandmother is expecting me by 2. She shifted her bag on her shoulder, a canvas tote bulging with wrapped presents, modest packages in recycled paper. He looked up from his laptop, suddenly aware of how empty the office would feel without her presence, without the soft sounds of her moving through the outer space. "Of course. Have a good Christmas, Miss Dawson." She lingered, one hand on her bag strap, and he saw the hesitation in her face, the war between propriety and something else. "Will you be all right?" she asked quietly. The question disarmed him completely. No one asked him that. No one thought to. "I'll be fine. You're spending it alone." It wasn't a question. Somehow she knew. "I prefer it that way." Her expression softened into something that looked dangerously like pity, and he hated it. Hated the vulnerability it exposed. Hated that she could see through him so easily. "No one prefers to be alone on Christmas, Mr. Sterling." "I do." The words came out defensive. "Liar." The word hung between them, gentle but unshakable. He stood abruptly, anger flaring, not at her, but at the truth she'd named, at the rawness of being seen. "You don't know me, Miss Dawson." His voice was cold, the tone he used in boardrooms to end discussions. "I know you better than you think." She stepped into the office, let the door close behind her. "I know you work late because going home means silence. I know you take your coffee black because your father told you sugar was weakness. I know you haven't celebrated Christmas since your mother died when you were 12. I know you keep her picture in the bottom drawer of your desk, behind the files, where you think no one will see you looking at it." His breath caught. "How?" The words died in his throat. "I pay attention," she said again. "It's my job, but it's also..." She stopped, looked away, color rising in her cheeks. "It's also because I care." The admission fell between them like snow. Soft, inevitable, transformative. The office was so quiet he could hear his own heartbeat. Nathaniel crossed the room slowly, stopping just close enough to catch the scent of her perfume. Vanilla, and something clean like rain. Close enough to see the way her pulse beat at the hollow of her throat, quick and nervous. "Why?" His voice came out rough, stripped of control. "Why do you care?" She looked up at him, and in her eyes he saw something that terrified him more than any hostile takeover ever had. Tenderness, unguarded and absolute. "Because you're not as alone as you think you are." She reached up, hesitated with her hand halfway to his face, then let it fall back, as if she'd caught herself crossing a line. "And because someone should tell you that it's okay to want more than this. More than work. More than silence. More than proving yourself to a father who will never be satisfied." "Lily..." Her name on his lips felt like a confession, like stepping off a cliff. She stepped back, breaking the spell, and he felt the loss of her proximity like cold air rushing in. "I should go." My grandmother... Wait. He caught her wrist. Gentle, tentative, a touch that asked permission. Her skin was warm under his fingers, her pulse racing. Come with me. What? She stared at him, eyes wide. Tonight. Christmas Eve. He stopped, forced himself to say the truth that had been building for months. I don't want to be alone, and I don't think you should spend the holiday worried about me. She stared at him, searching his face for something he wasn't sure he could give. He saw the conflict in her eyes, professionalism warring with compassion. Where? She whispered. Anywhere. Nowhere. Just not here. He gestured at the office, at the tower, at the life he'd built that suddenly felt like a prison. Please. For a long moment, she didn't move. He watched the decision form in her eyes, saw the moment she chose him over caution. Okay, she said softly. Okay. They left the tower together, stepping out into the snow-hushed city. The doorman looked surprised but said nothing. Nathaniel had no plan, no destination, just the overwhelming need to be near her, to understand this pull between them. They walked through Central Park, past families pulling sleds and couples holding hands, past ice skaters spinning in circles under strings of lights. The park was transformed, magical with snow and evening light, filled with laughter and the warm smell of roasted chestnuts from vendor carts. And he found himself telling her things he'd never told anyone. About his mother, how she'd loved Christmas, how she'd filled their house with music and baking and joy until cancer took her in 6 brutal months. How his father had responded by erasing every trace of her, every reminder of softness, teaching 12-year-old Nathaniel that love was weakness and sentiment was failure. About the weight of expectations, the crushing pressure to be perfect, to be invulnerable. And she listened. Not with pity, not with judgment, just with that quiet, steady attention that made him feel, for the first time in his life, like he was worth hearing. She asked questions that got to the heart of things. She made observations that were gentle but unflinching. As the sun set and the park lights flickered on, casting everything in soft gold, she stopped beneath a street lamp, snowflakes catching in her dark hair like stars. Thank you, she said softly. For what? For letting me in. For trusting me with this. She squeezed his hand. I know it's not easy for you. He reached out with his free hand, tucked a strand of snow-dampened hair behind her ear, let his fingers linger at her cheek. Her skin was cold from the wind, but underneath he felt warmth. She leaned into the touch, just barely, an unconscious movement that spoke of longing. And he felt the world narrow to this. Her breath, his heartbeat, the space between them shrinking. But he didn't kiss her. Not yet. The moment felt too fragile, too precious to rush. Instead, he whispered, "Thank you for seeing me." And in her eyes, reflected lamplight and falling snow, he saw everything he'd been too afraid to want. Connection, belonging, the terrifying possibility of being known and chosen anyway. They ended up at a small Italian restaurant in the West Village, the kind of place that wasn't in any guidebooks, that you'd only find if you lived in the neighborhood or had a friend who knew. Red checkered tablecloths covered mismatched tables. Candles stuck in wine bottles dripped wax down their sides in layers of color. The walls were covered in photographs. The owner's family, spanning generations, all smiling and alive in captured moments of celebration. It was warm and loud and smelled like garlic and fresh bread, and utterly unlike anywhere Nathaniel Sterling usually existed. He loved it. He loved the way the owner, a woman in her 60s with flour in her hair, greeted Lily like family, kissing both her cheeks, and scolding her for not visiting sooner. He loved the way Lily relaxed, her shoulders dropping, her smile coming easier. This was her world, he realized. This warmth, this authenticity. Lily ordered for them both an Italian that flowed naturally. Pasta carbonara that came steaming and perfect. House red wine in thick glasses. Bread still hot from the oven. She told him about her grandmother, about growing up in Brooklyn with more love than money, about summers spent in this very restaurant helping in the kitchen while her grandmother worked double shifts as a nurse, about the books she read on the subway, escaping into other worlds during the long commute, about the dreams she'd had once of being a writer. "Why did you give up writing?" he asked, watching her over the rim of his glass, memorizing the way candlelight played across her features. She looked down, traced the rim of her plate with one finger, a nervous gesture he'd seen her do with papers on her desk. "I didn't give it up. I just postponed it." Her voice was quiet, careful. "My grandmother got sick 3 years ago. Pneumonia that turned into complications. She was in the hospital for weeks, and when she came out, she needed help. Physical therapy, medications, modifications to the house." She paused, took a sip of wine. The medical bills were devastating. Even with Medicare, even with her savings, there wasn't enough. I needed steady income, good insurance, benefits that would cover her if something happened again. Your assistant position offered all of that. Understanding hit him like a punch to the chest, stealing his breath. The frayed cardigan, the old portfolio, the same lunch packed every day. She wasn't staying because she lacked ambition. She was staying because she had the kind of love that made sacrifices look like choices. "That's why you stay. That's why I stay." She met his eyes, defiant and proud. "And I'm not ashamed of it. Taking care of the people we love, that's not settling. That's everything." He set down his glass, leaned forward across the small table. "What if you didn't have to choose? What if I could—" "Please don't," she interrupted, voice suddenly tight, eyes bright with unshed tears. "Don't offer me something out of guilt or pity, or some misguided sense that you owe me. I don't need saving, Nathaniel. I need to know that I'm more than a project to you, more than a good deed." His name. She'd used his name, and it sounded like both a plea and a warning. "That's not what this is. Isn't it?" Her hands trembled slightly as she set down her fork. "You're a billionaire who suddenly noticed the help. I'm the assistant who got too close, who saw too much. This is—" Her voice cracked. "This is a story that doesn't end well. We both know that. It doesn't have to be that story." He reached across the table, but she pulled her hands back into her lap. "But it is." She stood abruptly, nearly knocking over her wine glass. She grabbed her coat from the back of the chair. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have come. This was a mistake." "Lily, wait." He stood too, fumbling for his wallet, for words, for anything that might keep her from leaving. "I can't do this." Her voice broke completely now, tears spilling over despite her attempts to hold them back. "I can't be the person you turn to when you're lonely, and then disappear from when you remember who you are, when you remember what I am. I can't. I won't survive that." The truth of it hit him like winter air, sharp, clarifying, brutal. She wasn't wrong. His world was filled with people who existed at arm's length, relationships built on transactions and temporary need. Why would she believe he could offer her anything different? "I care about you," he said, the words feeling inadequate even as he spoke them. "I know." She pulled her hand free from his reaching grasp, and the loss of her touch felt catastrophic. "But caring isn't enough. Not for me. Not anymore. I deserve someone who's sure." Someone who isn't going to wake up in a month and realize this was all some Christmas fantasy. She left him standing by the table, weaving through the crowded restaurant. The owner looked at him with something like accusation. He threw cash on the table, far more than necessary, and followed Lily out into the night, but she was already halfway down the block, moving fast. "Lily!" He called after her, but she didn't stop, didn't turn. He stood on the snowy sidewalk, watching her disappear around the corner, his breath coming in clouds. The city was beautiful, crystalline with cold, strung with lights, full of people going home to warmth and love, and everything he'd convinced himself he didn't need. He pulled out his phone, stared at her name in his contacts, and realized with devastating clarity that he'd been lying to himself for months. He was in love with Lily Dawson. Completely, terrifyingly, irrevocably in love. And he'd just let her walk away because he didn't know how to be anything other than what he'd always been. A man built from distance, too afraid of wanting to ever reach for what he needed. His phone rang. His father's name flashed on the screen. He answered. "Nathaniel, I heard you're spending Christmas alone again." His father's voice was all edges, no warmth. "Good. Sentiment is weakness. Your mother would have made you soft." Something in Nathaniel's chest finally, irrevocably broke. "No," he said quietly. "She would have made me human." He hung up, blocked the number, and stood alone on a snowy street corner in Manhattan, feeling like he was standing at the edge of a life he'd never chosen, and a future he was too terrified to reach for. Above him, church bells rang midnight, Christmas morning, and Nathaniel Sterling made a choice. He showed up at her grandmother's brownstone in Brooklyn at 2 a.m, snow in his hair, heart in his throat, more afraid than he'd been in his entire calculated life. The taxi ride across the bridge had felt eternal, giving him too much time to think, to doubt, to imagine all the ways this could go wrong. But the alternative, going home to his empty penthouse, losing her forever, was unthinkable. The neighborhood was quiet, working-class Brooklyn with brownstones packed close together, their stoops dusted with snow. Christmas lights still glowed in some windows, colored bulbs and inflatable Santas, and the warm promise of homes where people belonged to each other. Lily's grandmother's address was carved into the doorpost, 247. The lights were still on, warm and yellow behind lace curtains. He knocked, his knuckles raw from cold. Lily answered the door in flannel pajama pants and an oversized sweater that swallowed her frame, and the sight of her, eyes red from crying, face bare of makeup, hair loose around her shoulders, undid him completely. She was so beautiful it hurt. Not polished or perfect, but real, vulnerable, heartbreakingly human. "Nathaniel." Her voice was hoarse, surprised. "I don't know how to do this," he said, words tumbling out before she could close the door, before he could lose his courage. "I don't know how to be soft or open or any of the things you deserve. My father spent my whole life teaching me that vulnerability was failure, that needing someone made you weak, that love was something dangerous that destroyed you from the inside out. And I believed him. God, Lily, I believed him for so long that I forgot." His voice cracked. "I forgot that my mother used to sing while she cooked, that she cried at movies, that she loved so fiercely it filled every room she walked into like light, that she made everything better just by being in it. And when she died, my father made sure I'd never be like her again. He trained it out of me, systematically, until I couldn't even recognize the parts of me that might have been capable of what she was." Lily stood frozen in the doorway, one hand pressed to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "But you..." He stepped closer, snow melting in his hair, breath coming in clouds. "You see me, not Sterling Enterprises, not the billion-dollar empire or the penthouse or the reputation. You see the parts of me I thought I'd buried so deep no one would ever find them. The parts I inherited from my mother, the softness, the longing, the desperate need to be known. And it terrifies me, Lily. Because if I let you in, if I let myself want this, want you, I don't know how to guarantee I won't lose it. Lose you. I don't know how to love without the fear of losing. Nathaniel. She tried to speak, but he couldn't stop, the words pouring out like confession. I'm in love with you. The admission came out raw, unpolished, absolutely real. I've been in love with you for months, maybe longer. Maybe since the first time you brought me coffee and smiled at me like I was a person instead of a position. And I know I'm late. I know I hurt you tonight. I know I'm standing on your grandmother's doorstep at 2 a.m. like some kind of romantic hero in a novel. A small smile broke through her tears, watery but genuine. He laughed, helpless, the sound catching in his throat. I was going to say disaster. You're both. She stepped out onto the stoop, into the snow, close enough that he could see the tears clinging to her lashes, could see the hope warring with fear in her eyes. But you're here. You came. I came. He reached for her hands, held them like prayers, like the most precious things he'd ever touched. They were cold from the night air, and he brought them to his lips, trying to warm them with his breath. Because the thought of spending the rest of my life without you is worse than the fear of losing you. Because you were right. No one prefers to be alone. I've just been too afraid to admit I wanted something different. Wanted someone. Wanted you. Specifically and completely. She was crying freely now, not bothering to hide it. And he wanted to kiss away every tear, but he waited. Waited for her to choose him the way he was choosing her. Waited for permission to hope. I'm not easy, she whispered, her fingers tightening around his. I have student loans that will take decades to pay off. I have a grandmother who needs care and might need more as she gets older. I have dreams that might not ever come true, or might take years, or might look different than I imagined. I can't give you the polished, perfect life you're used to. I don't come with guarantees or 5-year plans or ROI projections. I don't want perfect. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing away her tears with infinite gentleness. I don't want polished. I want real. I want messy. I want you, Lily, exactly as you are. However you come, whatever that means, whatever complications come with it. I could lose my job, the ethics of us, a CEO and his assistant. Then I'll hire you as something else. Or I won't. Or I'll step back from day-to-day operations. We'll figure it out. He pressed his forehead to hers, breathing her in. None of that matters compared to this, to you. Your father. I blocked his number. He smiled, feeling lighter than he had in years. Decades, maybe. Turns out some bridges are meant to be burned. Some relationships are meant to be ended. And some people... He pulled back just enough to see her face. Some people are worth risking everything for. She laughed through her tears, the sound breaking and beautiful. Tell me I'm not too late, he whispered. Tell me you still... I love you, she said, the words fierce and sure, no hesitation. I've loved you since the day you noticed I take my coffee with too much cream and started having the kitchen stock extra. Since you asked why I stayed, like it mattered to you, like my answer mattered. Since you looked at me like I was something precious instead of invisible. I love you, Nathaniel Sterling, and it terrifies me too. We can be terrified together. That sounds terrible. It sounds perfect. And then finally, he kissed her. Soft and slow and deep, tasting like salt and snow and second chances. She wrapped her arms around his neck, pulled him closer, and he lifted her off her feet, spinning her once in the falling snow while she laughed against his mouth. When they finally broke apart, breathless and smiling, she took his hand. "Come inside," she said softly. "My grandmother will want to meet you." "At 2 a.m? She's been waiting up. She has very strong opinions about the man who made her granddaughter cry on Christmas Eve." He followed her into the warmth, into the small brown stone that smelled like cinnamon and old books. And as Lily's grandmother appeared in the hallway, tiny, silver-haired, eyes sharp with protective love, Nathaniel Sterling understood for the first time what home was supposed to feel like. Christmas morning arrived with pale sunlight filtering through lace curtains and the smell of coffee brewing in an unfamiliar kitchen. Nathaniel woke on Lily's grandmother's couch, a crocheted blanket tucked around him that smelled faintly of lavender and mothballs, and found Lily curled in the armchair across from him, watching him with soft eyes and a small smile playing at her lips. "Good morning," she whispered, voice still rough with sleep. "Good morning." He stretched, feeling the ache in his back from the old couch, and couldn't remember the last time he'd slept so well. The penthouse had a bed worth $20,000. This couch probably came from a thrift store, but he'd slept better here than he had in years. "Coffee?" she offered, already standing, wearing different pajamas now, soft cotton with little snowflakes. "Please." They'd talked until 4 a.m, the three of them, Lily, Nathaniel, and Ruth Dawson, who'd scrutinized him with the sharp attention of someone who'd lived long enough to spot insincerity from a mile away. She'd asked him about his intentions, his childhood, his plans for the future, what he believed about family, about commitment, about what it meant to build a life with someone. And he'd answered honestly, holding nothing back, feeling more exposed than he'd felt in a boardroom full of investors. Finally, Ruth had patted his hand with her small, strong one and said, "You'll do. You've got work to do on yourself, young man. But you've got a good heart under all that armor. I can see why my Lily loves you. But hurt her and I'll know. I always know." "I believe you," he'd said, meaning it completely. Now, in the soft morning light, Lily handed him coffee in a chipped mug that said, "World's Best Grandma," and settled beside him on the couch, her feet tucked under her, their knees touching. Outside, the street was quiet except for the occasional laugh of children trying out new sleds. "What happens when we go back?" she asked, the question he knew had been weighing on her mind. "To the city? To reality?" She wrapped her hands around her mug. "To Sterling Tower and board meetings and your actual life. What happens to us?" He set down his coffee, turned to face her fully. "The ethics alone, a CEO dating his assistant, it's complicated. I could quit." "No." The word came out firm. "You shouldn't have to give up your job, your security, your health insurance because of this, because of me." "Then what do we do?" He thought of his office, his tower, his carefully constructed empire, the thing he'd built to prove his worth to a father who would never be satisfied. And he thought of this, her hand in his, morning light through lace curtains, the sound of an old woman humming carols in the next room while she made Christmas breakfast. "I'll step back," he said slowly, the idea crystallizing even as he spoke it. "From day-to-day operations. I've been wanting to do it for years, but never had a reason. I'll move to the advisory board, put Hammond in charge as CEO. He's been ready for years. I'll consult on major decisions, maintain my shares, but I won't be your direct supervisor anymore. Nathaniel, you don't have to give up your company." "I'm not giving it up." He took her hand, threaded their fingers together. "I'm choosing a different role, one that lets me have a life outside of work. I want that, Lily. I want mornings like this. I want to know what it feels like to build something that matters more than market share. A relationship, a home, a future that isn't just about proving I'm enough." "What will you do?" She was crying again, but smiling through it. "I don't know yet. He brushed away her tears with his free hand. "But I'd like to find out. With you." Before she could respond, his phone buzzed on the side table. Multiple times. Urgent. He picked it up and felt his chest tighten. Texts from board members, from his COO, from his head of PR, all saying the same thing. Your father leaked a story to the press. Sterling CEO in inappropriate relationship with assistant. It's everywhere. He closed his eyes, feeling old anger rise. Of course, his father couldn't let him go without trying to destroy him first. Lily saw his expression change, reached for the phone. "What?" He showed her. Watched her face go pale, then hard. "He's trying to ruin you. He's trying to control me, same as always." He set the phone aside. "Let him try. This could destroy your reputation, the company stock. I don't care." And he meant it. Let it drop. Let people think what they want. I know the truth. You know the truth. That's all that matters. But he saw the doubt creeping into her eyes. The old fear that she was something to be ashamed of. Something less than. Something that would drag him down. "Nathaniel, maybe we should..." "No." He set the phone aside, took both her hands in his. "Hey, look at me." He waited until she met his eyes. "Listen to me. You are not inappropriate. You are not a scandal. You are not something I need to hide or be ashamed of. You are the woman I love, the woman I choose. And I'm not letting anyone, not my father, not the board, not the press, not anyone, make me believe otherwise. But what if he's right?" Her voice was small, scared. "What if people think I'm just..." "Let them think what they want." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. Soft, insistent kisses that said everything words couldn't. "I know who you are. I know what we are. And I'm going to stand in front of every camera and reporter and board member and say exactly that. You're not my assistant anymore. You're my partner. And anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me." Ruth appeared in the doorway, hands on her hips, still in her robe. "That man still bothering you from beyond the phone?" Nathaniel looked up, startled by her perception. "How did you..." "I wasn't always old, young man. I know what a toxic parent looks like. I know what control disguised as concern sounds like." She crossed the room with surprising speed, took the phone from the table, and with ease that belied her age, opened the settings and blocked every unknown number. There. Problem solved. He wants to leak stories? Let him. You've got better things to do than play his games. Now come have breakfast. I made pancakes and they're getting cold. Lily laughed, a sound of pure relief and love, and Nathaniel felt the last knot of tension in his chest unravel. This was what family was supposed to feel like. Not conditional approval, not manipulation, just fierce, uncomplicated love. They ate pancakes at a small kitchen table covered in a vinyl cloth printed with roosters. They opened modest presents, a scarf Ruth had knitted for Lily in deep blue wool, a book of Mary Oliver poetry Lily gave her grandmother with passages already marked, and the gift basket Nathaniel had grabbed from a bodega, which Ruth declared perfectly practical. And it was perfect, messy and imperfect and utterly, completely perfect. Later, as they walked through the snow-covered streets of Brooklyn, bundled in borrowed coats and scarves, Lily leaned into his side and said, "You know this changes everything. I know. Your life, your work, your reputation, everything you've built." Good. He stopped on the quiet street, turned her to face him, snow falling softly around them. "I want it to change. I've spent 30 years building a life I didn't really want. I want to be different now. Better. Real." She kissed him then, deep and sure, and he tasted hope and the future they were building together. Spring came to Brooklyn like a slow unfurling. Cherry blossoms on Ruth Street opening in clouds of pink and white. Morning light warmer and more golden through the windows. The city shaking off winter and remembering how to be soft. The brownstones seemed to breathe easier, their stoops filling with people again. Neighbors calling greetings across the narrow street. Children playing stickball in the warm evenings. Nathaniel had kept his word. Every single one. He'd stepped back from Sterling Enterprises in January, moving to an advisory role that let him consult on major decisions without the daily grind of running an empire. The board had been stunned, some supportive, some quietly resentful of the change. His father had been furious, had tried to rally board members against him, had threatened lawsuits and press disasters. None of it had worked. Nathaniel had never felt lighter, freer, more himself. He'd bought a brownstone 3 doors down from Ruth's in early February, close enough to visit daily, far enough for privacy and the space to build their own life. It was a fixer-upper, nothing like the pristine penthouse he'd left behind. The floors creaked, the radiators clanked. The kitchen was from the 70s and needed a full renovation. He loved every imperfect inch of it. Lily had moved in with him in March, and now the house smelled like her. Vanilla and rain, and the lavender she kept in terracotta pots on every windowsill, their purple blooms catching afternoon light. Her books filled the shelves he'd installed, their spines cracked and loved. Her grandmother's quilts draped over the furniture. Her coffee mugs, mismatched, collected from thrift stores, filled the cabinet. It was cluttered and lived in and absolutely perfect. She'd started writing again. Really writing, not just stolen moments on lunch breaks. He'd wake some mornings to find her at the kitchen table, laptop open, coffee gone cold in the mug beside her, completely lost in whatever world she was building. Her face would be soft with concentration, lips moving silently as she worked through dialogue, fingers flying across the keyboard. He never interrupted those moments. He'd just make fresh coffee, set it beside her with a kiss to her temple, and watch her smile without looking up, her hand reaching blindly to squeeze his before returning to the keys. They were building something together, a life that didn't look like anything he'd imagined but felt more right than anything he'd known. He'd started mentoring young entrepreneurs, using his experience to help people build businesses that actually mattered. He'd joined Ruth for her book club, becoming the only man in a group of fierce Brooklyn grandmothers who argued about literature and brought homemade cookies. He'd learned to cook, badly at first, then better. On a Sunday morning in late April, Nathaniel woke to sunlight streaming through gauzy curtains that Lily had hung, the cheap fabric transforming the light into something soft and dreamlike. He could hear her humming in the kitchen, something tuneless and happy, the sound she made when she was content. He pulled on sweatpants and padded downstairs barefoot on the cool wooden floors. She was at the stove, making pancakes in one of his old Columbia t-shirts that hung to her thighs, hair loose around her shoulders in waves she hadn't bothered to tame. The sight of her, completely unself-conscious, bare feet on the worn linoleum, flour on her cheek, made his chest ache with gratitude so profound it almost hurt. "Morning," he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind, pressing a kiss to the curve of her neck. She leaned back into him, tilted her head to give him better access. "Morning. Ruth's coming for brunch in an hour." Perfect. And he meant it. After Ruth left, they stayed on the porch he'd spent March rebuilding, surrounded by the small garden Lily had started planting, herbs and tomatoes and wildflowers just beginning to sprout. The afternoon light turned golden, and the neighborhood hummed with life. "I have something for you," he said, pulling an envelope from his pocket. She turned, eyebrows raised, a smile playing at her lips. "It's not my birthday." "I know." He handed it to her, watched her face as she opened it. Inside was a letter on thick cream paper with an embossed letterhead, one of the best literary agents in New York. She read it slowly, her eyes widening, one hand coming up to cover her mouth. It was an offer of representation for the manuscript she'd been working on, the novel she'd been afraid to even hope might find a home. The agent had loved it, had called it luminous and essential. They wanted to send it out to editors immediately. Nathaniel, her voice was thick with tears. Keep reading. She looked at the second piece of paper, a check made out to Columbia University's continuing education program, enough to cover the MFA she'd always dreamed of. I can't accept this, she whispered. Why not? It's too much. I can't let you. He took her hands, pulled her close. Your dreams matter to me. Because you matter to me. This isn't about saving you or fixing you. It's about being your partner, about supporting the things that make you come alive. She was crying now, the kind of tears that meant yes, that meant gratitude, that meant love too big for words. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing me, for choosing me, for believing I was worth all this. Always, he said. Always you. They kissed as the sun set over Brooklyn, the city humming around them with life and possibility, and the endless, ordinary magic of two people choosing each other, every day, in 1,000 small ways. That night, as they lay in bed in their imperfect brownstone, Lily's head on his chest, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her shoulder, she said, Do you ever regret it? Leaving Sterling? Never, he said without hesitation. Do you know what I did today while you were writing? What? I sat in the garden and read a book. For pleasure. No purpose. No strategy. Just a book that made me feel things. He laughed softly. I can't remember the last time I did that. What book? The Great Gatsby. The one you gave me at Christmas. She lifted her head, looked at him in the dim light. Again? I keep finding new things in it. He touched her face, his thumb brushing her lower lip. I finally understand why you underlined that passage, about the smile with eternal reassurance. And, she whispered, and I found mine. 4 years late, but I found it. He pulled her closer. I found you, and everything changed. Better late than never, she murmured against his chest. Much better. Outside, the city breathed, millions of lives unfolding in millions of small moments. Inside, in a brownstone in Brooklyn that smelled of lavender and possibility and fresh coffee, Nathaniel Sterling held the woman he loved and understood, finally, what his mother had known all along. That strength wasn't in distance or control. Strength was in the courage to be soft, to need, to love without reservation or fear. The scent of pine and cinnamon from that December day had given way to cherry blossoms and morning coffee. The tower still stood across the river, but he no longer belonged to it. He belonged here, to this moment, to this woman, to this life they were building together, imperfect and real and entirely their own. In the quiet of their shared breathing, the soft dark of their bedroom, Nathaniel Sterling finally understood what it meant to come home. If this story touched you, leave your rating from 0 to 10 in the comments and subscribe for the next journey.